In three, two, one. Listeners, welcome to the Business Method Podcast. Today we have Punit Dhillon on the show. Punit, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on your show, Chris. This is wonderful. I mean, I had a chance to listen to a few of your podcasts that you've been involved with, and some of the people that you've had on your show. It's inspiring. Some of them are people that I look up to as entrepreneurs. So it's really cool
Yeah.
to have this opportunity.
Maybe that's a fun question to start off with. I always like to ask successful people who kind of they admire and look up to. Who are some of the entrepreneurs out there today that you look up to?
So it's a great question. I have some local heroes that have definitely stuck out in terms of the things that have happened in the biotech space because it's just close to home and but in terms of names and people that more broadly people recognize it, Oprah Winfrey stands out as an exceptional entrepreneur in terms of where she started from, how she continues to expand continue to evolve as an entrepreneur from her area of expertise or profession, and then into these other ways that she's been able to dialogue and inspire others.
Mm-hmm.
I think that David, it's just tremendous in terms of the evolution. I can't, I also have to recognize that I love the structure of entrepreneurs like Tim Cook, in terms of discipline, that they have, not the same as Steve Jobs. Everyone looks at, Steve Jobs as being this really disruptive individual. I think he's very inspiring, but the focus on operational discipline that Tim Cook has, and how he's used that and leveraged that to become to make Apple the most valuable company in the world. I think it speaks in terms of leadership, and it speaks to the company's innovative style. It starts from the top, I think, and that's done really well.
Yeah. I like, as you were talking about Oprah, I was thinking about kind of her evolution. And she's not really, she didn't start out as an entrepreneur. She was an interview host,
Yeah.
and she honed her skill so well, and her personal brand got so big that she had to be an entrepreneur. And that's the evolution of a lot of entrepreneurs, especially nowadays. They become so great at their skill, whether it's an athlete, which you were an athlete, whether it's an interviewer, journalist, whatever it may be, that you get to the point where you have this fame behind you, and this influence, and you have to start a business and sell things behind the backside of it in order to do that. And it's a fascinating thing to see.
I had the privilege of actually listening to Oprah live, not at a show, but she was doing a speaking tour, I think, it happened to be in Vancouver. So I had an opportunity to go with some friends and listen to her do a talk, and never been to one of those types of shows before. It's like picture Tony Robbins, but Oprah Winfrey instead, in terms of the inspirational talk.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the key highlights from that talk was just how she made a point about how deliberate she is about what she says yes to versus what she says no to.
Yeah.
So the case in point, a lot of people, ask for donations, your friends, family, she was very clear about the importance of giving, but the importance of recognizing, hey, where do you want to give and why?
Mm-hmm.
And how powerful it is in terms of just being clear. But if you apply that lesson in terms of everything we do as an entrepreneur, well, in order for us to be successful in all the things that we're trying to achieve, and call it be high performing or carry out this purpose in life, you have to become very deliberate about where do you see your value for yourself, and the time and bandwidth and everything else that comes along with that.
Yeah. As a successful guy, and I like how you put that, as a successful guy, successful entrepreneur, executive, where do you see the value in yourself?
Wow. So that's
I threw that right back on you, didn't
yeah, I was like, wow,
I?
these podcast people and their loaded questions. I had a podcast earlier, and there was like a very rhetorical question, like, how do you answer that? I know.
Uh-huh.
So the I would say, look, I, I'm like all of us, we're like vehicles, right? Like you, you know, my staff probably gets annoyed, because like, you can make a lot of commotion and have this ripple effect when you walk through an office or whatever. Uh, Everything that we do is think of it just basically, there's an action reaction. Okay. So, what's the positive actions, or sorry, positive reactions you want from reactions? I
Mm-hmm.
think in terms of answering your question, so I'm not dancing around it. I hope that I can share my experiences, the exposure that I've had to different businesses, people, bosses, other the athletics, and and hopefully inspire others. I think lucky to be able to have a seat at the table in what you know this table and the boardroom and other um, companies that I'm involved with. Not everyone gets that same experience. I recognize that, and at the same time, I know what I've done in order to achieve that, and the help that I've gotten along the way from mentors and other people that had the confidence in allowing me to have the different positions that I've had. So it's a responsibility that I take upon myself to give that same experience, the same opportunities, and opening the doors for others. As cheesy as it sounds, that's
Mm-hmm.
a hugely important part of of overall growth. Like we live in this hyper focused social attention that we've seen in the last 18 months because of the pandemic and because of some of the other things that became very visible and on the surface about equality, about a whole range of different issues. And I think that in order for us to see that progress, the positive change that we're looking for, that's where you have that responsibility, I have that responsibility, and at the same time, my accounting manager or the person that sits at the front desk, they have that same first impression that they have to make when another person comes in the door that doesn't even work here. It's a guest of the company or a guest of some. So all of these things, I think it's a ripple effect that's very important.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see entrepreneurs as kind of, at I don't know, kind of maybe on the pedestal or on the top, especially if you've done some business over a period of time and created some successful results from that.
Mhm.
But as you were talking about that, this made me think of it. We, the vast majority of entrepreneurs are massive givers, giving of their time, their energy, thinking about their employees, their customers, their clients, thinking about how all the things and decisions that we make is going to have a ripple effect throughout the company and then throughout services and sales and
Yeah.
then those products and services we send out to the world, how those are going to affect the world. And the idea that there's greedy capitalists, which some of them do exist, but for the vast majority of entrepreneurs, they're just people that have so much to give that they do it in facets that not a lot of people understand that aren't entrepreneurs, and we're giving so much all the time, which is another reason why often we burn out, because we're working and giving so much of ourselves to the business and to the world, really.
Yeah, and I think that that's case in point. Like you do have to double down where you need to. You need to also take advantage of that. We live in a free economy, and we do need to be competitive in order for there to be progress.
Yeah.
I think that competition is a very healthy thing. That's the way that we're going to continue to level up. But along the way, you have that rising tide that brings all the ships up together. Uh,
Yeah.
that's the important part of it. So I firmly believe in kind of the, the the responsibilities that are bestowed upon us working in a free economy, but at the same time, you got to do it in a way that's ethical, moral, and you're doing things that are aligned with your values and purpose.
Yeah. It's a big job, isn't it?
Yeah. It is.
It
It's
is.
like, but that's the beauty of like, you know, not to go on a tangent here, but we have one shot at doing this, right? It's like we live one life. So that's why part of this whole experience for me of going through this book writing thing, it started because of these types of questions, these fundamental questions that are usually burning inside of us anyways. Like, I I do spend a lot of time in endurance sports, so I have a lot of alone time. If I'm like running a long run or doing a long bike, then you're just stuck in your own mental, like mental games and physical endurance. So one of the questions I had to ask myself turning 40, I had this great experience over 20 years working with a variety of different companies and developing a whole range of new technologies. I had a wonderful opportunity working in life sciences where you're really developing technologies or products that are hopefully going to help patients with an unmet medical need.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I worked hard in order to achieve, certain personal goals and other things. And on one side of it, there's like this simple checklist that most people have, or even the majority of people, like, okay, they got to finish their education, they have to get a career, they have to settle down, or get a house, or so you get, do accomplish all those things, and then you're in your groove, you're in your stride, and then what do you do next, right? It's like after that checklist is completed, then it's very much focused on purpose. It's very much focused on why am I doing what I'm doing in order to feel satisfied. So when I come back to saying, okay, I have one shot at my life, and I want to put the gas pedal down when I need to, and I also want to put the brakes on when I need to take stock of the responsibility of that I have in terms of my roles and the different people that my actions impact.
Mm-hmm.
This was the whole thing. Like, this is why this book for me was important. So I can basically apply that experience going forward. So I was fortunate to have certain experiences for 20 plus years in the business world. What am I going to be holding myself accountable to for the next 20 or 40 years?
Right.
And it could be that, hey, I'm going to spend more time surfing, which I didn't do in the first 20
20
years.
years. Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is that you've done a lot of amazing things in your life. One of the things that really stood out in your bio was that you've helped raise over $500 million with the companies that you've worked with or founded. You're formerly the vice president of finance and operations for Inovio Pharmaceuticals, president and CEO of OncoSec, chairman and CEO of Skye Bioscience, and creator of the Torpedo Publishing, plus many other things. And I know you guys did about 125 million with Inovio, and then so what really interests me is because we have so many. I'm a bootstrap entrepreneur. We have so many bootstrapped entrepreneurs that are like, hey, we get an idea, we put up a website, we build a funnel, get some ads to it, see if the idea works. If not, move on to the next idea, sort of thing. And we don't come from the world so much of like, hey, we get an idea, then we raise a few $1,000,000 for it, or $100 million or whatever. And you're really good at this. So I'd love to talk more in depth about the strategies of raising that much money, and maybe the methodologies, some of the successes and failures that you've had along the way through that, from raising that type of money.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks. That's a jam-packed in terms of a lot of stuff to cover there. But
Yeah.
just to break it down, funding and capital raising has definitely evolved since I started in this in the corporate finance world to in the things I learned working at I cut my teeth in working with a life sciences healthcare fund, and I was basically a junior analyst. I worked closely with my uncle, who was a venture capitalist. I was responsible for drafting memos and stuff like that. But they had $1 billion, and they could deploy. They were writing big checks. Fast forward to now, there's a ton of different financial products, or not necessarily financial products, vehicles available for fundraising. We have crowdfunding sources, You have different types of financing tiers. You have banks and other types of angel investors that you can essentially bring ideas forward and see what sticks. And there's usually an investor out there that is intrigued if you have a sound business. In terms of my personal experience, yeah, those numbers are big that you quoted. At the same time, there's probably a multiple of that in terms of doors slammed in your face, missed opportunities, things that didn't work out in accordance with the plan. And I won't be shy to say that for all the companies that I've been involved with, I've experienced more than once the door is about to close on us because we're running out of cash and not in the revenue stage, or didn't have an operating runway. So each of those situations brings you, it teaches you new things. And thankfully, we've developed some great relationships on Wall Street and other streets around the world, including a great group of investors in Asia and a great group of investors in Europe. So I thankfully, you're only as good as your track record. We've been lucky that along the way, certain people have done well with different companies that we've been involved with. Inovio, when I was involved, was like a sub $50 million company. Last year, it went over $1 billion in terms of market capitalization. Oncosec, I started with $100,000.
Oh, wow.
That was a loan. So
What year did that start?
2011.
Okay, nice.
And then we raised a lot of money at Oncosec and did a partnership with Merck, and they're doing a phase 3 trial. That's just in itself, that's probably the budget of what the company's already raised. So it's pretty, in terms of when you talk about the size of the trial, paying for drug and cost of operations. And then, been involved with Emerald, and we've done a lot of different companies and different licensing deals. And now with Skye, it's a great place to put this company, best cash position it's ever been in. We've done about over $15 million in the last 11 months. And I'm very fortunate that kind of investors that have backed us in this company, they have a track record with working with this management. And we're going to continue to make sure that our stakeholders remain happy and keep pushing our technology forward.
Nice. When you have an idea for a business and you need to raise money, what are the first steps, or can you run us through that methodology that you have?
Yeah, so we at this point, most of these businesses that we're involved with have a fair degree of maturity. So it's not like, hey, this is just a new concept. Generally, in life sciences, we're working with technologies that are clinic ready or going to be clinic ready, and there's a very clear development path. Like, we've done the diligence around what's this product opportunity, is there differentiating characteristics, and then formulate a clear development path. So in biotech, the thing that's challenging is that you have a long way before you see revenue, right? You do 10 years in terms of development time alone before you actually see any revenue from product sales, if the product is even approved. I mean, that's after going through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. I've been focusing on developing technologies to this, kind of the sweet spot of phase 2, phase 2B, where we've eliminated or de-risked the product enough that you are able to secure a licensing partner with a big pharma. And this is what attracted me to start Oncosec. This is what's attracted me to work at Skye, is that we're working with these novel technologies that have a tremendous amount of interest and investment interest. But you have to show a viable development path and execution, and there's all the risks that are associated with that. So it's about taking those calculated risks and then going to a certain investor group. So I have been relying on a network that has developed over my career, but I am also continuing to elevate that network as well. There's so many different tiers of investors. Like you go to Fidelity, not ready to go to Fidelity for an investment in Skye. One day we
Right.
will be, once we've taken it to a certain inflection point. Then Fidelity will probably answer our phone call and say, hey, we'd like to present this story to you. So I think it's just a matter of kind of working through all of those things. At Oncosec, we started with a few capital raises that were very private rounds, then into some healthcare hedge funds, and then worked our way up to some very large, reputable healthcare funds like Point72, Ridgeback, like these Orbibed, very well established healthcare funds that typically, once they write a check, then it also adds a lot of credibility that others are interested in coming in after you. So we're going to do that. That's my approach in terms of a rationale. But these days, I'm generally focused on more mature ideas, and interested in spending the time necessary to get to a meaningful inflection point where it can be licensed to a pharma partner.
Tell us about the what was the first company that you had to raise money for?
So I worked at least in a support capacity to the CEO for Inovio Pharmaceuticals. That was the first place where I got exposure to raising money in this multi-million-dollar kind of stage, or this echelon, I guess you would say.
Uh-huh.
Prior to that, I've been involved in other biotech companies, but at Inovio, we did some tremendous deals. Like we did a $30 million deal, and within 24 hours, was still a record to me in terms of
Wow.
what you can execute on if you have the fundamental science and the right timing and confluence of events that happen, and all of a sudden you pull the trigger on doing a capital raise when and being in a public company, there's a lot of the other components around regulations and other things that go into that in order to be able to time those types of events and get that kind of win.
Yeah. Can you tell us some stories about maybe sometimes you guys faced rejection and it was really difficult to get past that rejection, or one that hit the company or the people raising the money pretty hard?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good one. Lots of rejections. Probably more rejections than there has
Then
been
yeses, yeah.
than yeses, which is typical of most stories. But I can definitely point to 2011, 2012. So I just started Oncosec in 2011. I'd done this interesting deal where I spun the technology out of Inovio. I was working at Inovio for almost 9 years or 10 years. I led a merger between our company that was based out of San Diego and a company out of Philadelphia. So we merged the company, and then I stayed on and did the entire kind of synergy of the two companies and make sure that all the operations are in place. But part of that also was that certain assets and certain products we were developing, we decided to shelve. So post-merger, like in year 3, I was still working out of the San Diego office and spending a lot of time with the new CEO, Joseph Kim. He was open to me moving to Philadelphia, and he encouraged that because that's where the decision making was happening. I was actually interested in that because Inovio was in a transformative place. Took my wife to Philadelphia, and she's like, "No, this is not happening. We're living in California. But our family's from Pacific Northwest in Vancouver, so we didn't want to do a double connecting flight in order to get to Vancouver whenever we want to see our moms." So that was the kind of line in the sand, saying, "Okay, I can work my 9 to 5 job at the San Diego office," which felt like a 9 to 5 job at that point because it was like, hey, everything's kind of running in good order, or take a little bit more risk. So knew that there were some products that we weren't developing. Ended up speaking to the board and management about spinning that technology out, and that's how Oncosec was born. And at the same time, I spoke to the scientific founders who was a oncologist focused on melanoma, Dr. Adil Dowd, and he was very supportive of working on moving this forward as well with me. So in order to do that deal, I had some friendly negotiation with Inovio where they gave me, they allowed to license the technology based on a loan agreement. So I basically licensed the technology for like, I don't know, some large magnitude of dollars. Like, I think it was $3 million plus there was like other components to it. But I was on a payment plan in order to pay that money. But I started on the same note. I started OncoSec and we had $0 to start with. So we literally we had $100,000 loan, put in our personal money. That was the commitment. Didn't take a salary initially. All of these like things that you sign up for as an entrepreneur. And then in the first year, we raised about $1 million. I think so it was about $1 million. That was only enough to do operating cash and start making these payments. So start chipping away at this large number that we needed to pay to Inovio, and then we were almost out of cash. So in fast forward, a year goes by, you're like, oh no, we're not gonna make it. Thankfully, two investors stepped up that had invested with me at Inovio, and they're like, okay, you know what, we believe that this is going to be potentially another success. We're understanding the risks, but at the same time, we're going to hedge ourselves with all of this other protection. So we got another $3 million in that helped stretch the runway a bit longer while we were trying to start several clinical trials. And then essentially we hit a wall. We weren't able to attract the capital. It was a tough time in the market. This is 2011, 2012, when people were still digesting the financial crisis, and the biotech market had taken a little bit of a beating as well. So people were very reluctant to coming into new codes. I was a proven CEO, so I was not a proven commodity, and you can only get so far. So I went on. I tried a different tactic. I went up a tier. So I had my usual suspects of investors, and they were like, no, we're going to wait until you're a little bit further along. I went up a tier to a very reputable healthcare fund out of San Francisco, but I took Dr. Dowd with me, who was the scientific co-founder, and said, okay, I can do the business pitch, but I need Dr. Dowd to do the technology pitch. And we had this publication that we had just published in the journal of, I think it was Journal of Clinical Oncology, which was the initial study results. Thankfully, that meeting went really well, and that investor was interested, but he didn't say yes at that point. Okay. He was like, I think let's say comfortably over 50%, maybe even to the 60% territory, but he was still working on his diligence. And Jay Venkatesan, he's in my book, Dr. Jay Venkatesan, and he ended up. We were at an investor event where there was a bunch of different investors, and I did a pitch there, and there was just a perfect confluence of events. So we had a few more investors that were like, oh, this is actually very intriguing. So that investor ended up stepping up, and these other investors ended up stepping up, and we ended up doing a deal that was like the transition point for the company, $7.2 million. And it solidified everything and allowed us to pay in Inovio, have operating runway, and then from there we just kept
building.
Building.
So you went through 3 million or 4 million, and then
we went through 4 million through the first year, just for operating expenses, and starting three phase two clinical trials.
Wow. Yeah. How did you connect with that investor that was a tier up from your usual suspects?
I don't recall how I was introduced to him, but I believe I was introduced to him by one of my board members or somebody that within the network. I don't recall, but there's also there's these group of investors that when you've been in the business long enough, that they exist. So sometimes it is a matter of just, hey, this is who I am, and this is what I'm working on, and I'd like to meet with you. And you
Hmm.
know what? 9 times out of 10, they actually say yes. Uh,
They're because they're looking for places to put their money.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there's always, they can always say no, but they usually, have a duty to listen.
Yeah.
So that's part of the challenge is most people don't make enough effort making those cold calls that usually, the
Gets in
important
the
part about developing those relationships. And right, so I've
yeah.
done that with my board members and people like um, Dr. Jenkins, who wrote the foreword on the book. I I wrote a piece of this on LinkedIn. I met her in 2013 at JP Morgan at a conference, a biotech conference that happens in San Francisco. And I would just like, I knew who she was. She was working for Bristol Myers at the time, and she was like global head of regulatory affairs or something like that. So super senior position. She reported to the CEO. And I was like, I would just start talking to her. And then every year I see her at the same conference, and there was a pre-event to the conference where I knew certain people would be there, so I purposely register and make sure I'm there. And I think after year three, she finally was like, this guy keeps like talking to me and being persistent.
Uh-huh.
It developed a rapport where, you know, funny enough, she became a board member for me at Oncosec, or she joined the board, and she's been an incredible mentor and very incredible entrepreneur herself. She launched the company in that whole period herself and sold it. And so yeah, it's just one of these things that you never know who you're going to meet, so you got to stay open minded and be persistent.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about going into that board meeting with the upper tier investor, or going into that meeting. What were some of the things you guys did to prep to make sure that you were on par with the conversations you had or the structure you had, like getting on the same page for what you were going to pitch to the investor, and then how that all went once you were in the meeting?
Yeah, so I forgot this podcast called Business Method.
Uh-huh.
So that's why you're getting very granular. Wow, you're making me
Tell me your methods.
going to the granular thing. So here's the thing. First, I want to answer that question by saying that these methods have all evolved with experience.
Yeah.
So at the time, I knew about the importance of an investor deck and a non-deal roadshow deck and regulation fair disclosure, which is Reg FD for short, and what you can say to investors versus not say to investors, what's in the public domain. So there's a dance involved, and there's usually a pretty good decorum and structure around that dance that's involved with investors. And after doing enough of those types of meetings, thankfully, from being on the road with my last company and being there with the CEO and listening to him do his presentations, you also learn from those experiences of what kind of questions are going to be asked and be prepared for that. So a lot of information goes into a slide deck, and it's typically about 20 slides,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes about 24. But the rule of thumb I will say is don't do a presentation that's longer than 20 slides, and ensure that your slide deck has a well thought through um, flow, arc associated with it. I don't think there's any rule in terms of how your pitch should be, but it's important that if you're delivering the pitch, that you're comfortable with the material. And usually in these situations with sophisticated investors, they are familiar with the science, they're familiar with the landscape, they're going to throw you off, they're not going to let you finish the slides, they're not going to. So the slide deck ends up being more or less a prop that you refer to when that important questions come up. So you never really have a chance to go through it from A to Z. You're usually using
Mm-hmm.
here, okay, let me pull to this slide. This is where, so if you have all that information ready, especially when somebody asks you a question, I think it's confidence to an investor that that, hey, that you're prepared and you've thought through some of the things that are on their mind. So in terms of that's the overall methodology. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's a secret. Not it's not the same recipe every single time. You have
Right.
to know your audience and
Yeah.
prepare for that. I've been in a meeting, for instance, with one of the premier healthcare investors, will not mention who, that didn't even let me like utter a word of my presentation, and
Uh-huh.
just said next, and like, just was very clear about what their expectations were
Uh-huh.
about the meeting. So, don't expect that you're going to be able to go there if you practiced all the right moves, that you're going to be able to do your moves, like, unless um, you know unless you're calling the meeting, and you're then they're coming to you. Be prepared to do their dance that they want you to do.
Do you come in with terms too, like, hey, you come in and what we're looking for is $7 million, offer X amount of equity, percentage, return on your money? Is this? I'm certain you guys probably think about that beforehand, right?
Yeah, so a lot of what you do in the quiet periods, call it the quiet periods, when you're not actively raising money, but you're getting your story out, is continuing to do that, what they're called non-deal roadshows, where basically you're meeting with investors, you're learning what their expectations are, you're keeping track of detailed notes of your Q&A, and you, you're you getting you have your ear to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
People often refer to, oh, they heard this on Wall Street. Well, what they mean is that they went to a meeting, they took good, adequate notes, they brought that back to their team and said, I had this meeting with so and so, and this is what they asked me, and hey, should we be thinking about this? And now we heard it from 3 or 4 people, and now let's think about, maybe we need to evolve this part of our story. So that there is this, back and forth. So that, I think that periods that you're not doing an financing round are highly critical, because that's when the story really begins to gel, and that's when you, as a management team, can really hone in on, here's exactly our development strategy. This is what the expectations are on the street. This is what our expectations are with our current stakeholders, our board. This is what we can do internally as a management team, and everyone's aligned. Full
Mm-hmm.
transparency, good communication. The next part. Sorry, oh, that was
No problem.
seriously, yeah, thoughts of our own. So the other part of it, though, is when you're doing a financing, yeah, there's naturally an evolution of what you're alluding to. So at some point, you start putting a framework together of how much capital is being raised, why, what are the use of proceeds, how are you going to do it. If the company's going to do it on its own, then that's a particular way you go about that. Otherwise, you involve a professional like an investment bank, and they help be the glue between you and the other parties.
Is it often they give counter offers?
Absolutely, you're
Yeah.
negotiating. Yeah, until you sign on the dotted line, you're negotiating terms. I just closed the deal last night. We were negotiating terms until 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's fascinating. Any other, I don't want to say tips or tricks, but any other skills, like important skills that you think it takes for somebody if they're going to go out and start raising money, and maybe talk to a person that's just starting out with it, that doesn't have a lot of contacts. They've got a good business going, and they're like, okay, the next level is raising money. What can we do? How can we figure this process out?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. First of all, on the business side, being clear about the expectations. I don't, a lot of early businesses and entrepreneurs, they feel like they have to promise the world, and then it's hard for them to navigate a path to actually, get to that promise that they're trying to make.
Right.
So I think it's better you articulate a very clear plan that investors can understand, and it should be simple. It should
Yeah.
be You should be able to deliver this in a very simple way, where people know exactly what your product does, how much is it going to take to get to a meaningful inflection point, what are those parameters for expectations on a return on investment, and all the other kind of steps in between. So clear business plan. The other part I think that's also important as an entrepreneur or manager or somebody that's in the position to go and ask for money is you got to be yourself. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of people out there that get stuck in this fake it till you make it type of scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're not being genuine with what your capabilities are, and um, you overstated what you've said. Most often, you're speaking in hyperbole, and I think that that's very disingenuous. And so you have to know your audience, and you have to know yourself and feel comfortable in being authentic to who you are and what you can deliver. And I think that's what gets the most of these deals done. Um, so the rest of it, there's lots of different types of investors out there. There's always going to be somebody that's interested and willing to listen, and and don't be afraid when people shut the door on you and stuff like that. That's part of it. That's all. That's part of the games. And you know what? There's also part of the games is a negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everyone. Imagine going to, I don't know, like, what sports do you play?
Jiu-jitsu.
I was I was just gonna say jiu-jitsu. Imagine going to jiu-jitsu
Uh-huh.
and you're just sitting there rolling on the mat. Oh, sorry, you're on the and you're just laying on your back,
Uh-huh.
and the person that you're grappling with or um, rolling with, doesn't do anything or whatever. It's just like just like still or whatever.
Uh-huh.
There's a part that you get um, it's just back and forth that's
Right.
necessary for progress. Negotiating terms, use it as an opportunity for you to hone your skills on how you want to negotiate and how
Yeah.
you want to be a better negotiator. Use the inputs that you're getting from the other opponent. In the case of jiu-jitsu, it's like, how am I going to counter that maneuver?
Yeah. I would imagine you guys have, parameters too when you go in before, like this is how far we can go, or maybe even you
Well,
come up with those afterwards. This is how high you can go. This is how low you can go, sort of thing. How much you can accept, how much equity or interest you can give on the investments
absolutely.
beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, being a public company, we do have parameters that we set by the board first and the board needs
Before you even go in.
before I even go in on
Yeah.
the board
Mm.
gives me certain you know parameters and say, hey, okay, I would first tell the board this is what I'm interested in doing. This is what my proposal would be. We would have a discussion around it and have some sort of consensus on what are the parameters that
Yeah.
I should be going out with.
So I know you're a high performing entrepreneur and you're into, tips and ways to perform better as an entrepreneur, but also as a person. In your book, you talk about your book Catapult. You outline a 10-point framework that's backed by the mindset of corporate athletes. Tell us briefly about the 10-point framework, but first tell us what a corporate athlete is so we understand when you go into the 10-point framework.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, the generally so Catapult the book was an opportunity for me to really take all these different learnings and things that we've been chatting about and these different insights and put it into a framework that made sense for me. It's a result of a very unique life journey and all the different work done in biotech and life sciences, and then also being an athlete. So definitely inspired by being an athlete and then launching into this entrepreneurial life at a very frenetic pace. So the idea here was that the discipline of growing up as an athlete really stuck with me and carried into my professional career. And then when I was putting some frameworks together, I also saw that professional athletes, interestingly enough, they make transition. And after being a professional athlete, they usually have their next uh, iteration of their career. It could be
Right.
they become a successful entrepreneur, or they're a sportscaster, or whatever. They're very successful in their second half. So leaning into that and my own experience, and then specifically being an endurance athlete, I was trying to package it together in terms of what do I believe is necessary in terms of that framework. What would I tell myself
Mm-hmm.
if I was 20 years old again, and how would I approach things differently? And uh, I don't know if we already covered this, but I think one of the things that I was asking myself turning 40 was that where am I going to be focused on in the next part of my career,
Yeah.
and how can I really be aligned with my purpose? Because you know I'm happy with how where I'm at, and where all the things that all the different teams I've been involved with have achieved. But how can we continue to serve the interest of overall growth of what's important to me right now is positive change on the planet. There's a lot to be done. So yeah, that's how these 10 principles were born. It starts with true accountability, then it moves into this concept of the importance of coaching, and that stems from
Mm-hmm.
being an athlete, as well as I also was a coach for a brief period as a swim coach, and how that same philosophy applies to the business world. A lot of people think that there's a stigma associated with having a business coach or a mentor. That's a super positive thing, and it's going to help elevate your game, and it's going to help you push beyond your comfort zone, just like a coach does in athletics. And then there was the other things about honing in on defining a purpose. A lot of people are not clear about their individual purpose, and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of just focus on the day to day and not taking a step back and say, okay, what am I doing this for? What if this wasn't here? How would this affect my life? Or would I change anything? Like, am I happy with what I'm doing? Am I getting joy by the work that I'm putting into work? The uh, the focus that I have on myself, as well as what I'm doing in terms of overall life. That could be with a family, that could be with other loved ones and friends. So so that concept was important. And then there's other things that are incorporated in here about working together as a community. How being working as a team, you can effectively get a lot accomplished versus being selfish and working only for yourself.
Yeah.
And then again, other sports analogies like finding your stride, um, uh, meaning that if you're at the pinnacle of sport, if you've been a competitive athlete, when you have that special feel.
Mm-hmm.
You said you do jujitsu, so when you're in your groove, when you're in your flow in jujitsu, and the days you're not. As a swimmer, I don't have that same feel of the water as I did as a teenager, because I don't swim 20 hours a week anymore. But still, that finding your stride, I found my stride in different places now. Like, I like cycling. I definitely feel like I'm finding a stride in terms of what we're doing with Skye. And then it ends with other concepts like, hey, take a step back, just like how you go, and if you go cycling and you're riding up a large climb, when you get to the top, it's not like you just turn around and you go back down again. Usually you want to take in the view. So this concept of just sometimes you have to take a step back, take a beat, breathe, take a better look, and it's recognizing that if you're striving for perfection and you're paying attention to those little details, you also know when you've done your best. So
Mm-hmm.
keep looking for those opportunities where you reach a certain objective, and take advantage of what you learn from that. Get that broad view, soak it in, and then next time you're going to go up even higher. And that journey is very long in our lives. So how are we going to get the most out of keeping that engine going? Like, these nuclear plants, like, it's fascinating science, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so we're our own nuclear plant. How are we going to give ourselves that energy? I measure that energy in terms of joy. Am I having fun with what I'm doing? Because that's pretty much endless. I can probably go for days without sleep, as long as I'm having fun with what I'm doing. It could be a mega transaction to an amazing cycling experience or an amazing long run or something.
What if it's something, Puneet, that you just absolutely have to do, but it's not giving you any joy? What do you do about things like that? Because we all come across those from time to
Yeah,
time.
and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of life, right? Like we learn from that. So part of this is that I take those experiences as learning experiences. Um, every single interaction, every person you meet, every going back to the first comment I made about an action reaction. So it's up to us in terms of the mindset we take from that. It's a glass half empty or glass half full in terms of that negative experience. But each of those experiences, if it's negative, um, it is some mild form of resilience sometimes that's forming, where you're able to take that and hopefully rebound even faster, in another situation. Or it's going to be repetitive and you're like, okay, I'm going to deal with that. This is going to happen every single week, and I'm gonna work on it. But I'm also working on my way to get out of it. I'm going to train up somebody else to take over that job, or I'm going to reschedule so that I can address this in a meaningful way, or I'm going to take it out. It doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
It's not bringing me any joy, and it's time to move on. But after you've exhausted all the other things, so yeah, I think one's life is about taking full advantage about all those experiences, and that's what's going to enable overall success. And I'm sorry, but I'm just a super positive person that way. Like I have,
That's okay.
I think in order for us to have positive change, you got to take all these little battles that come along with it. That's part of life.
Yeah.
We not everything's rosy. There's some freaking, and usually we think our situation's bad. It's always like, there's another person that has a worse situation. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna make the most of it.
Yeah. I think that is an incredible way to wrap the podcast up with such a good tip and a way to look on life. Puneet, I really want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing about your investing experience and all the other tips that you gave us. If the listeners want to reach out and learn more about what you have going on, where's the best place they can do that at?
Yeah, they can reach out to me directly on my website. It's punitdhillon.com, so it's my full name.com, and then there's a tab there in terms of contacting me or my team. And yeah, happy to connect. And anybody, I'm usually very responsive, so please do that. You can also find us on social media. And same thing with Skye Bioscience. If anyone is looking for more information or the other stuff that I'm involved with. Really proud of Yale Canada, by the way. So just a small plug there in terms of what we're doing in terms with that charity that's
Mm-hmm.
focused on youth and entrepreneurship.
Excellent. What's the website for that charity?
Uh, YaleCanada.org.
Perfect. Okay. Puneet, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And listeners, we want to thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.